lots of puzzles. Go. Sorry. Okay, so there's all this hodgepodge of states, and that's what would make it up. This is a little bit later on, but the largest of the Holy Roman states would be right here, and that's Austria. And eventually Austria would become to dominate the Holy Roman Empire. Eventually it would become Austria-Hungary, but this is one of the banners of the Holy Roman Empire at the end of the 18th century. And these are all the shields, the symbols for many of the largest principalities of the Holy Roman Empire. Which one? Do you see one you know, or which one? Yeah, point. I want to. What are they? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a little the shield for Berlin, yeah. And where'd you say this?
And it's like in the back of
Oh, so they have that there. That's very close to the symbol of for Bundesreich, the German Republic, is it? Yeah. And so, yeah, and then yeah, Berlin. There's other where's yeah, no, I can't, but I've seen a lot of them.
Why do they all kind of look the same? Like,
Well, it's got a limit on where you could do them.
there's three red crosses.
Okay, so what's going to get in the way? First, let's get to the first invasion. An invasion from Indo-Europeans, the Slavs. The Slavs being one of the first group to invade, and same deal, they're being pushed westward by other tribes, just like the Visigoths were pushed by the Huns, and moved into here first, followed behind by Magyars. Magyars were fierce warriors from the Indo-European plains, and they would eventually settle. The Slavs would push in, and then the Magyars, and they would settle in present-day Hungary. And that's why if you go to Hungary today, their language is kind of amazing. Lots of letters, especially if you're used to English or even more Germanic languages. It's not Germanic. And we'll come back to that. I got to find my picture. I took a picture when I was in Budapest, and it was of a tobacconist. And I believe there were 18 letters to the word tobacconist. And someone pronounced it for me, and I'm like, because it's just, I'm an English speaker. But, and then pushing into this area would be Arabs and through the Mediterranean area.
Wait, which one's the green line on the map?
The green are the Slavs and the Magyars coming from the same area. And we're not to the Vikings yet, but let's get to the Vikings. The video did a good job, but let's cover a couple things about the Vikings. So the Vikings, approximately 730 to 1000, and you can see that at the end of Charlemagne's empire. And France had no forts. Charlemagne would not allow local lords to build a fort, and they did. They had to destroy. Okay, most of their fortifications were wooden, but still a fortification. He didn't want the noblemen to get too much power and challenge him. And so it's weakened. There's no protection. Monasteries were one of the sources of the wealth of the church. It could be held there. They have everything from relics to one of the big things they have all these gold gilded crosses, relics, and great source of wealth. And another thing the Vikings would do is they would sweep up and down the rivers. I like this painting, showing them up the river, going up the river.
Size of their boat. That is.
And they would capture wealthy people holding for ransom. And that is as old as there has been crime, and it still goes on to this day. Especially areas where there's a lot of piracy. What's the number one way pirates make money today? Ransom. There's still a lot of pirates today. Yeah, all on the Missouri River, there's pirates. You go to areas where there's not a lot of stable government. So, for example, today, right here in Somalia, lots of pirates. Also, there's a lot of pirates still here. There's so many places to hide in Indonesia. There's still a lot of pirates. The big place in the Americas is here. So many places online. But back to this. Oh, and then when America first became a country, I should add, this whole coast would be every major city. Basically, a fourth quarter, it's all along the middle, the North African coast of the Mediterranean. Yeah. Outside of the borders, yeah. Yeah, the Barbary Wars under Jefferson. So our tiny little navy didn't do much good.
Hey, we
but-
did something.
So I like this picture too. I like these ones that they would take ransom, hold people, and one of the ways they would also said spread terror. So they go through, they don't want to have a long battle. They don't want to besiege a castle. They want to come in, get rich, and get up the river, down the river, back to the coast and go. And so, terror. And so you go to one village, you resisted, you kill everybody there. What's the next village going to do?
They're gonna go try to read.
Enjoy yourself, take what you need. And so do you see this gruesome picture of what's happening here?
It's probably babies.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing we should also add, we'll see this in medieval art, I'll come back to this again. Proportion as we know it, that whole concept did not exist. It just did not exist. Their mind didn't work that way. And now we see everything in proportion, but then they didn't see it. That's why you get the weird, massive size. So let me give you an example. We look at this map, right? And we know for a fact that I could not actually put my hand and crush Michigan. Which basically looks like a hand, doesn't it? But I could not do that, right? We know that because it's drawn to scale. Our mind automatically does that, right? I know I'm saying what's obvious. That wasn't obvious to someone.
Oh my God, you crushed me again.
Not even that, it just, this makes no, yeah. I don't even think that way, so it doesn't compute. It just literally did not compute. And so, the Viking raids would go up and down the coast. At first here, eventually they're gonna build forts, and we'll get back to that. But Anglo-Saxon England was very vulnerable, long coastline, hit and retreat, long rivers. They went all the way down to Spain. They went in the Mediterranean. Every place was vulnerable. Hit and run, get out. Rarely they stayed, at least at first, for the first couple hundred years. Yeah.
Did no one ever try to go after them? Because they all kind of came from the same.
They didn't have, the ships, to take a ship on the North Sea, it's gonna be incredibly risky. And no one had anything close to that kind of organization. So there's nothing they could do. Now, the Viking ships were flat bottom. They could go up and down rivers, but of course, any kind of storm, they'd be overturned. I mean, they had to be pretty hardy, brave, kind of crazy people. Crazy is not strong enough of a word. And they would go to here. And why did they call it Iceland? Say it again. Yeah, confuse people. They're hoping more people would come or not come and invade. So they said it, but it's Iceland, don't come here. And then they would eventually go to Greenland. Why do they call it Greenland?
So people can go there.
They tried to convince people to go there by saying it's beautiful. They didn't make it long, and they made it all the way to North America. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about these raids. And so the flat bottom boats, they were known for terror. They would use terror as a weapon. Do you remember what the Blood Eagle was? Here is a picture of them doing the Blood Eagle, and thankfully we can't see much. Who said, ah?
Sure did.
That's a little bit. So what would, do you remember what the Blood Eagle is? We have to talk about it and hope somebody's walking by and hearing this. You remember? Yeah. They would come to the back. Yeah, they might break the spine, but the big thing is pull the lungs out. And the lungs are stretchy. Don't ask me how I know, but the lungs are stretchy and thus like wings. I don't think I need to tell you this, but I'm going to say it anyways. That's fatal. So what a horrible torture.
No.
So not only that, they have these warriors who go through this kind of almost like this trance and this fervor that you may, I'm not going to watch the video again.
You need to watch.
And they were called the Berserkers. And these were Viking warriors who were known for their great ferocity
Great
and philosophy. Now, there's all kinds of pictures of them. Most of them are actually quite comical, but they were known of being just like they go into this trance and come out of it and just be fighters of just incredible skill, or just be raving lunatics screaming with their battle axes and people like, okay, and run away. And that works, by the way, just screaming like a lunatic and people get out of your way. So I'm not saying this, but the next time the halls, I'm not telling you to do this. But if the hallway's crowded and just start going, ah! People will get out of your way. And if you do that and get in trouble, what are you supposed to say? Mr. Larson told us to do this. I didn't want to, but Mr. Larson told us. So they also went a few more places. So they spread into this part of the Baltic states here, into what is now Russia, down the Volga, down into the Black Sea, even threatening Constantinople. They also went all the way into Italy. They would eventually settle. Normans would settle down here. In fact, in 800, the Byzantines thought Constantinople was doomed. All these Viking ships showed up. Then the Vikings realized Constantinople has 16-foot walls that are 20-foot thick. Let's go back. Too hard.
There's a village farther down.
Exactly. So they would settle in Sicily, and then we mentioned Iceland, Greenland. And there were some settlements here, but they didn't make it. Lots of reasons. Weather was a lot worse. And nobody really heard about it except a few people. It's not like when Columbus arrived and everybody heard about it because of the printing press. The world was different, and that's only just 600 years different. Yeah.
So like, if you say the Normans went to Sicily,
Yeah.
are they the same ones that went to northern France?
Not the exact same ones, but yeah, they would take the same names: Normans, Vikings. Yeah, so there'd be a big Norman influence here in southern Italy. And I mean, if you go to Italy today, there's a big difference between northern and southern Italy. I mean, just like there's a big difference between northern and southern United States, but it's noticeable. It's like you cross a line in Italy. And the driving is a little bit crazy in northern Italy. No offense. Southern Italy, insane. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you my driving story in Naples when we get there. So with that, I should add, what happened to him in Greenland? The Viking settlers who did go there. We don't know. It actually kind of did. The mini ice age ended. It got a lot colder, and they just were gone. We don't know if they starved to death or they joined. The best guess is the survivors joined the neighboring tribes. Probably just the survivors.
The same thing what happened.
Yeah, probably. But not as many settlers came. More families came to Greenland. Most went to Finland where they were men trying to get rich and a lot of them left. But yeah, that's probably what happened. Same thing probably happened. Some of you might know of the first British settlement, the attempt in North Carolina called Roanoke Island. Some of you might have heard of that. Probably that's what happened. They just joined the tribes, probably. But we don't know. Huh? Aliens? Probably aliens, yeah. Hey, when in doubt, aliens, right? Okay, good. So let's get to the next thing. So the reaction across Europe, besides absolute terror, society, by definition, became more isolated. I mean, if Viking raiders were coming in at any time, you tend not to trust people. Oh, there's someone riding. Let's go greet them and make a friend. No, you hide.
Kill them.
Or, yeah, attack them. You don't trust anybody. Society became very isolated, much more insular. Does anyone know what the term insular means?
It's
Good guess, but like you're on an island, separate from everybody else. Isolated is insular. And so, for example, like Britain, it's Britain is much more insular compared to the rest of Europe. They're infamous for not knowing anything about the rest of Europe, British people, because they're an island, they're separate. So with that, not only that, and these are all the areas affected by Viking attack. Oh, what are these?
River.
Yeah, those are the rivers. And they rarely stayed. We'll come to it. Eventually they would, but not at first. Trade just collapsed. I mean, who wants to go out and get a wagon and hit the roads or take a boat down the Seine up to the North Sea to try to do some trade? Nobody did. And so trade, everyone got more isolated. You could see then what happened too. They ran out of specie. Remember species, gold and silver coin. Partially because either the Vikings are stealing it, they're bribing the Vikings to leave, or would you leave your specie in your front porch or your house? What was everybody doing with the gold coins they had? Yeah, burying it somewhere and hiding it.
And then they started doing that for less.
Yeah, Great Depression happened, they didn't trust banks, didn't trust. That's why there's these people going around with metal detectors in Britain, detectorists. And that's what they're looking for, these caches of gold that people hid from the Vikings and then forgot where they hid them. That's kind of a big deal. Some people found, just a few years ago, someone found a massive amount of gold coins that was probably hidden from Vikings. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, there's this kind of an entire Viking burial site.
Now that was one found a Viking burial. That was filled with coins and swords and wow. And if you find something like that, you have to sell it to the British government. They give you a lot of money.
How do you have to sell?
That's the law. It's their antiquities law, so you can't steal. You can't steal those kind of archaeological finds because they're owned by the people. And so with that, so for example, one of the future kings of France, Charles the Bald. Bald. It's better than like there's like a Frederick the Half-Witted and things like that, but Charles the Bald had to give 7,000 pounds of silver to Viking raiders. Basically, they stormed around. They surrounded Paris, and that's the way they would leave. So there's no money floating around. There's no money at all, and that's where you get this weird situation where what do you do if there's no coin? They use tally sticks. They would use sticks. This is a little bit one down the road, but they would do notches with them to show how much money they owed. So it's like basically like double entry bookkeeping, like you have a checkbook and you're totaling down, but you tally it down. And when either you would break it when the deal was done, or you would break it and give it to somebody else. And when you would put it together, you would pay back your debt. And so they would do this with imaginary Roman money. And this would go on to the 1200s, imaginary Roman money. So they just would say, on this tally stick, I have 100, you have 100, give me your tally stick, now I have 200. Now, does that sound ridiculous? Imaginary money. Have you ever heard of a credit card?
Yes.
That's imaginary money. Our whole economy now, the world's economy works on imaginary money. We imagine there's money. Sometimes it appears. Most of the time it doesn't, but that's what we do now. All money, like for example, dollars in the United States, it's a number on a computer screen in the basement of the Federal Reserve Bank in New York City. So, does that make you feel secure? Why not, right? It's always been that. What gave specie value? We just said it was valuable. So we imagined it was valuable and it became valuable. What's the difference? So they had credit. That's what they did, all by debt and credit. Yeah. That's a tally stick. Yeah. So also, every attempt at any kind of states or nations became very decentralized. You can't really have a state government because if you have a center of power and the Vikings come, you might lose everything. Now, the Vikings didn't like to tackle that big of an operation, but you never know. So out of this will come a couple things. First off, I know what you're thinking, but what if we're driving down the road and you have a child? Well, the natural place to put a child would be a hammock in the back seat of your car. So, you ever see the car when they have those two little hangers on both sides where you can hang clothes? Well, you can hook the hammock and they can sleep just in perfect comfort in the back of the car. Who agrees that is a great idea?
I can just imagine it going like this, and just getting.
Don't have to.
Or it starts spinning and they go.
Yes, that's it.
Just don't have to
Now-
start stop and you'll be good.
The best part is, it's only $6.95, but the gentle rocking will put them to sleep.
What if you go to a complete stop?
I should have. Safety? I'm so tired of kowtowing to save kids. Let them run around the car like I did when I was a kid. You know what my safety seat was when I was growing up? Use little car seats for babies. You know what I had when I was a kid? I used to stand up in the front seat of the car. And you want to know my safety belt? My dad going like this, the whole meal. That's all I needed. We were tough about it. That's actually, isn't that kind of crazy? Yeah, that's the way it was. There were nobody wore seat belts. There were no safety seats for kids. And most steering wheels were made out of steel. So if you got in a car wreck, your head was impaled. Moving on. Okay, I found the baby incinerator. So, another thing that happened was, everyone's kind of Latin. I know there are different dialects. It's really unclear. They lost that common language. There's not, you're not gonna have a school. Libraries are gonna be looted. And if everybody's more rural, it's hard to centralize a common location for a school. Because it's hard to get to. And so they're gonna lose that language. Now, doesn't mean they're not very intelligent people, but it's just not gonna have it. And this is a late medieval school, and you're going to get, therefore, first off, how do people know their history? Just like they did before the Romans. Myths, legends, things they could, that have minstrels would sing songs, and they would remember the story. And that would be their, have you ever heard of a folk tale? That would be kind of an exaggerated story about basically trying to give an origin story to something you can't explain today. A folk tale, yeah.
Wouldn't like a.
Yeah, exactly, that's what it is. And this would be their history. There's mixes of real history, but also within stories. And therefore, they had to have great memories. Memories that we couldn't even comprehend today. They just had to know so much. A few more things too. All these German languages, therefore, became more and more dominant. And this is going to be called, this word you have to get, the vernacular. Individual dialects begin to form. And what do we call the vernacular? We call them today the different languages. Look at the Germanic languages that are going to come out of there. French, I know there'll be some Latin elements in French, Italian, and Spanish, but they're all Germanic. And where did Germanic get their origins? Exactly. Indo-European sweeping in, those Germanic origins. And that is going to lead to, for example, that fake origin tale that the Germans would tell when they created Germany. These are the people right here are called Aryans. So they made this fake story up. But that's 1870s. We'll get to that next.
Why is it called Germanic?
It's the English bastardization of German. And so all of these, but then there's going to be all these different dialects. So you get in Germany itself, every little town will be different. Eventually, by the 1600s, you're going to get kind of low, middle, and I always call this high, but they say Bavarian, Austrian, German, and it is different. And high German is by elevation. I always thought high German, I think high is north. Don't you think north, south? I couldn't help it. But high is elevation. Low is lower elevation. Exactly. It's all by elevation. And so the German I took in college was high, mostly high German. And so when I was with my brother-in-law, who's from Berlin, and we were in Munich, and just couldn't talk about, they don't speak real German down here. And then the funny thing is, I'm sitting there and he ordered, I can't remember what it was, but he left. And the person who was waiting on us in this place is, I can't remember what it was, but she said to me, those Berliners don't speak real German. And it was so funny. I just enjoyed that immensely. Yeah. Maybe for, especially if you're German. It's pretty hard to learn. It's I think it's harder to learn than others, but you start getting, let's say maybe of the Germanic languages. But Magyar is impossible. And Russia, wow. And for English speakers, let's say Chinese is really good. Yeah, so because of all the different letters and, but yeah, for Germanic languages. For me, Spanish was easier. And once you know Spanish, you can do a little bit of Italian. There's a lot of connection.
It wasn't too bad until we got to especially the auto insurance. I don't remember what it is now.
It's auto insurance. Well, I love German language because they match all the words. And so you have all kinds of words together.
Actually,
In fact, I have one up here. Somebody made this. Since we're talking now, Alexa, I want to put this on. They put this up here for me. That means, of course. Yeah, a face that deserves to be punched is the way I look. Say it again. Yeah, a face that deserves to be punched. I wish we don't have a word in English like that.
But they don't have,
Huh?
they don't have demons.
They don't, yeah, they don't. They can't throw people out a window. All right, here we go. So with that, so there became a militarization across Europe. If you're going to be invaded all the time, you need forts. And so all of a sudden, with Charlemagne gone, everybody started building a fort. So the first one, the Motte Bailey fort, basically a wooden fort, either a hill, a motte or a motta, make a hill, you literally make the hill. If you go across like certain parts of northern France or in England, you see this hill, like this weird conical shaped hill that doesn't look natural. Yeah, they mounted this together for a fortification. So it would be, you'd have it walled by wood, the bailey would be the center area, basically more than enough for grazing land in case you had to go into the fort, and that would be the last defense, the last citadel on top of the hill. Yeah, and you make a moat around it, and then the stone keep, the concentric castle, all these castles start to be built, and it's amazing how fast. Hey, once you start building, when you need a castle, you learn how to make it really fast. And these forts are awesome. I love castles. I wish I had one. That's a hint. Think I'll get in to get for me down the road.
Christmas is coming up.
Yeah.
So you said that Vikings were
No.
would they still try to attack with like the smaller castles?
Sure, they might try to see if they can get it real quick. Maybe, do like a fake siege, see if they can get them to surrender or find a weakness real fast. If not, though, they'd leave. And so eventually these trained soldiers are going to become more and more important. Knights, who are really nothing more than gangsters. I'll protect you. And then, so there's an example of a medieval castle. This is one of the things people make a lot of models of a castle. The generic one, the most vulnerable place would be the gates. There's always like a barbican or something like this, another wall there in front of the gate. Castles are cool. That's one of the things I really like going to castles. We don't have enough castles here. The keep would be the last fortified center. So when I give you the assignment tomorrow, one of the things you could do is make a castle. Obviously to scale, but castles are pretty amazing. No, they're not nice places. They're dank, drafty, cold, miserable fortresses. Here's, for example, one in southern France. And this is a massive castle on a hilltop, too fearful of Arab attacks from the Mediterranean. If you get a chance to go to Carcassonne, it's really great. And then eventually by the Middle Ages, I'm sorry, by the 1800s, you're going to get fake castles built. And this is probably the most famous fake castle ever built. Yeah. So it's supposed to look like a castle, but it was actually done by Mad King Ludwig of Bavaria. It's south of Munich. And have you been to there? Yeah, it's kind of, I think it's by, you have to go, you have no choice. But it's not really a fortification. It's just supposed to kind of look like it.
What is it supposed to be?
It's palace. And yes, if you've seen the Wonderful World of Disney and the cat that's copying that, it is almost a direct copy. And so with that, so the Normans, these are more Viking wars. And by about 900, they decided enough. It's difficult. It's dangerous, the raiding. The French are getting much better. And it's cold in Norway. It's cold in Sweden. And so many of them under Rollo, they are actually thinking about conquering. But if you're going to conquer, you need some money. So they went up the Seine and threatened Paris. They threatened Paris with invasion. The king of France at that time, Charles the Simple, now Paris had a wall. They could have survived Rollo and his Normans, but instead they totally panicked. Rollo, who was thinking this war that's not going as well, yeah.
There is a lot of.
Charles is an incredibly popular name in France. That and Louis. So they gave them a big hunk of land. So this is what we have to get right here. They gave them all this land right here to the Normans. It's yours. And the people who live there, do what you want. It's yours. All they had to do is pledge an oath to a king and vow to be essentially their servant. What is a term for a servant? A vassal. And so that's Rollo looked at all those shields and those banners that they had, and he came up with this, the 3 lions for his. And what would this area be called? That's Normandy. So, oh, I almost forgot one thing. When they did the honor and did Rollo, we just thought Charles the Simple. I mean, he's called Charles the Simple. That means he's a simpleton. Hey, in a hereditary monarch, you're stuck with who's ever next. And if the next in line's an idiot, that's your king. But when Rollo had to kneel and pledge his allegiance to King Charles, Rollo started laughing hysterically at Charles and insulted him. And then all the other Normans laughed at him. And Charles was like, whatever, don't kill me. So this was already starting bad. But they went here, he became a vassal. When Rollo died, they did a Viking funeral for him. And they sacrificed 100 virgins. Male and female virgins, they put on a boat and rowed them out and caught the boat on fire and murdered them all.
They light the boat on fire.
Mhm. Now they would do that with a dead body too, but they did it with living people tied up on board. Supposedly they volunteered for this. For the Vikings, it was more like their army. Yeah. But like for the Egyptians, that would be more like servants. But army servants, kind of the same thing. And that would become Normandy. And relatively quickly, they became French. They started speaking French. They started acting French with a big accent, and they adopted some of the tactics of the French knights. And soon they became fierce warriors and very much involved in expansion and intriguing in England. And so the last thing, we're not the last thing. And that's going to lead to this. Then we get down the manorial system. What happened was all these towns and trade fell apart. They had to create kind of these self-sustaining farms, or this environment where they needed everything just around one farm, one manor, they had to do everything. They couldn't leave. And more, they were hoping they had a castle they could shelter in. And they had to be this way. I like this one with the manor, and you can see the calendar in the background. And they became kind of tribal, where it became then, okay, this one little group around one nobleman for the protection. And this tribe, that's where another word for tribal would be feudalism, and that's what feudalism. This manorial system. The Vikings, they packed in here. Other people would follow that, because remember, there's Magyar invasion, Slavic invasion, Viking invasion, Arab invasion, and it would lead to cities dropping, education dropping, trade dropping. And all the old Roman infrastructure finally just fell apart. And that's when you can see them like living in the ruins. It's also kind of amazing, isn't it, how long they lived with Roman infrastructure. They were still using Roman roads well into the 1800s. But they just started to fall apart. You could see the end of the Roman influence. So a few more things in about this. With that, what is manorialism then? Basically, the old system collapsed. The land would be communal. Communal means who owns it. Technically, everybody uses it, but it's owned by the Lord. In fact, the actual term is Lord's land. But he lets everybody use it. And so you might have the manor house. It would probably be shaped like a fortification. And then they worked on the land. These would be farmed by the villagers, and they would work it together and farm it. And then the Lord would provide protection from the Vikings. I will protect you. And the peasants would do their farming, they'd herd their cattle, they'd make weapons, do all that for the Lord. So everyone got that. So they have to give a hunk for it. There'd be a term for this called debt peonage, or after the Civil War, does anybody know what happened when to the poor, especially former slaves in the South, and they had to give part of their crop to the landlord? Yeah, this is very much like sharecropping. And the thing was, they owed the Lord for protection. They owed them. They don't have money. Remember, there's no gold. So they have to give everything else. Will they ever be able to pay that off? So they're stuck until they pay it off. This is kind of what happened in Rome. This happened every place else. And that's where we get the term serfs. Everyone got serfs down? Serfs. Who are serfs? They are people bound to the land until they pay for the protection. And they'll never have money to pay for the protection. So that's the system. They're not quite slaves, but they can't leave until they pay back their debt for protection. Will they pay back their debt? Right. But everything's going to go to the Lord. And one more thing. When the Viking threat is gone, will they still need protection? That's when I told you about the, nice farm you have here. Hate to see anything happen to it. And so, that is the beginning. I know what a lot of you are also thinking. You might be hungry.
No, what is it?
Okay, so this is a bacon wrapped, baked pea mush with chicken. No, we got one more thing to write down. And thus we're coming to the system called feudalism. With the king powers breaks down, there's violence everywhere, there's protection rackets. What's a racket? A criminal activity. Never got that. Feudalism. Feudalism, put a star, put lines by it, everything. Feudalism is something you need to know. Feudalism, out of that manorial system in the Vikings, this became a relationship, top down. Those on top would get loyalty from everybody below them. And what did you call people who pledged their oath to someone above them? They're what? That's where you get vassal. So on Monday, we'll quick do that. Then we'll do England. And then if everything goes right, we'll start Islam because we're setting up the Crusades. On Tuesday, then I will let you have a few days off because I'm by far too nice of a person. But what are we gonna have on Monday also? Quiz on what? 9.2. Very good.
Sorry, I left your friend.
So I said no yet. Maybe I can give you part of that. When you can get your presentation. Talk about when you can do that. We'll get something, we get. Are you really? Gosh, it's kind of hard. Really? You don't know what it is. Questions? Oh, sure. These parts for training that much. Similar. Okay, well, you're gonna have to learn. I think the Netherlands. You're just fans. It's really. And it's all really fun. That was the only place I've ever been with a significant number of women. That's pretty rare. You gotta look at it. But in the Netherlands, I was there were a lot of men and a big number of women. Oh. This is just. We played with some. It's better than having nothing on your bed.
Yeah, I'm with technology, it's a long.
But even then, I know you can't take your helmet off and. The only problem with that, yeah, but you already got. Yeah. Come on, John. Get that blind. All the way down. Yeah.
Get the heart. Wow, feudalism, nice.
Yeah, I changed my mind, we're gonna do feudalism.
All right. I'm down.
I like the dark mode, Mr. Partridge.
I got your presentation.
I'm doing also, like, one of the Spanish. The one of the Spanish.
Yeah, okay, how about we do it after Thanksgiving? Yeah, we'll do it then, Tia. If we never do anything on change. That's with the new one.
Oh my God. No, I don't. You okay? Yeah.
White. I don't see that person. Yeah, she's still. Yes, for all. I got